Hello, everybody. Welcome back. Today, we're going to be talking about fiberglass. Now, this is a suggestion from a good friend of mine that's also a subscriber that asked if I can make a few videos where I'm not necessarily building a prop, but getting a little more detailed into some of the aspects about the props that I do make. And today's going to be about fiberglass. Now, I know you guys have seen me do a lot of fiberglass on this channel, from building the body forms for the Angels to the skull mower, the custom welding helmet, and stuff like that. But when I do all that stuff, I don't really get too detailed into the aspect of the fiberglass itself, as far as what to buy, how to mix it, what you use, where you find it, how to apply it, all that kind of stuff. I just, tell you what I'm doing. I put the fiberglass on there, pull it apart, voila, here it is. So if this is something you want to get into and you want to learn a little bit about fiberglass and how it works and what to buy, this is the video for you. So stick around and hopefully all your questions are answered. Let's talk about some of the items that you're going to need to do a basic fiberglass project. Now, I want to apologize in advance. This video is primarily just going to be all talking, very boring, but I got a lot of information I got to put in this video for you guys, especially those that say have never done any fiberglass work before. They want to kind of get into doing fiberglass work and they don't know where to buy the stuff, how to apply it, how to mix it, all that kind of stuff. Hopefully by the end of this video, all those questions that you have will be answered and it'll kind of give you the confidence to give this stuff a shot. Or say you've already done a little bit of fiberglass in the past and didn't have a whole lot of success and you're not really sure why. I might bring something up in this video that might make you think, I don't remember doing it that way. Maybe that's what happened, and it'll kind of give you the confidence to give it another shot. I like working with fiberglass depending on what I'm building because it's not only strong, it's durable, it's lightweight. You can conform it into multiple different shapes, angles, and all that kind of stuff. It'll hold up to the elements. You can sand it, you can paint it, all that kind of stuff. So I like working with fiberglass, and it's a really good thing to know and be able to get into for building all kinds of projects and stuff like that. So we're going to go ahead and talk about what you see here on my workbench. This is pretty much everything you're going to need to do a basic project. It kind of looks like a lot, but it's really not that much. You pretty much have your fiberglass resins, your mats. You have two different kinds of mats, which we'll talk about in a second. Just some cheap paint brushes that you're going to throw away because this is going to be a one-time use. A good pair of gloves so you can protect your hands because you don't want to get the stuff on you because it's hard to wash off. So definitely protect yourself. And some kind of container that you're not worried about throwing away to do all your mixing in. And I'll explain why in just a second. So let's go ahead and get into the actual fiberglass itself. Now, this right here is your fiberglass resin. You can pick this up at any big box store like Home Depot, Lowe's, Ace Hardware, Walmart even sells this stuff. You can pick this stuff up on Amazon, stuff like that. Essentially, these larger jugs right here are generally about $60 for the larger one, about $30 for the smaller one. Depending on the size of your project, it's going to really determine on which one you're going to want to buy. Now, when you buy these things, you can always have this little plastic thing on top. This is mainly just for shipping purposes, because underneath there, you're going to find these right here. Now, these are your catalysts, or they also call them a hardener. This is what's going to create that chemical reaction that's going to take the fiberglass resin from a liquid state to a solid state. So essentially what you do is once you pour some of your fiberglass resin into some kind of mixing container, you're going to add so many drops of this to it. You're going to mix it up thoroughly, really good, and that's what's going to start the chemical reaction to creating that hard coat fiberglass surface that you're looking to do. Now, I know when people want to do their mixing and stuff like that, since this thing right here kind of comes with it already, and it's nice and convenient, I highly recommend not using this to do your mixing for your fiberglass resin. The reason why is because when it comes to fiberglass resin, if you don't get a good, thorough mix of essentially your part A and your part B, you're going to have areas that either aren't going to dry as fast as some areas or might not even dry at all. And that's because not enough catalyst made it to the resin. And these things right here are bad for creating that problem. Because when you get into these corners right here, especially we got this little extra piece of molded plastic that's in there, you pour your resin in there, you pour your hardener, and you're stirring and you're stirring. There's going to be so much of resin that's in these corners that's never going to get a good amount of the hardener mixed to it. And what's going to happen is, say like I'm putting it on my bench right here, I'm going to have a whole section that's nice and rock solid, hard, ready to go. And I have all these little soft spots, these little mushy, sticky areas that aren't drying as fast or never dry at all. Then you got to mix some more resin up, put them over top of those, so it helps boost that chemical reaction to try to see if you can get those areas to harden up, or if anything, you're just concealing it so you don't have to deal with it. So these right here, I highly recommend not using these to do your mixing. These are great for holding parts. Say you do hobbies, you need something to hold some screws or something like that, great for that. Don't use them for your fiberglass resin. What I like to use something that's rounded, just because it makes it easier for stirring and agitation and stuff like that. This is just a piece of a Coke bottle. I like doing that because I'm going to throw it away when I'm done anyway, so there's no sense in buying something I'm going to throw away when I have plenty of these hanging around the house. Now, the reason I like using round ones, I'm going to kind of use a concrete truck to kind of give you a rough description of, essentially for this. Whenever you look at a concrete truck, their mixing bowls are always cylindrical, and they're always at like a 45-degree angle. They're never vertically up or horizontally. And what that is that makes it so when they do the baffles, as the concrete goes inside there and it sloshes down on top, it agitates all the chemicals together. That's what gives you your best mix. So that's essentially what I do with my fiberglass resin. When I pour my resin inside here, I pour it in there, I put X amount of drops of the catalyst in there, I hold it at an angle like this, and I will stir it for about 30 to 45 seconds, something like that. And as I stir it, I'm actually lifting the resin up and letting it kind of just splosh back down, creating like a nice agitation, which also gives it a really good mix and allows it to really get everything thoroughly mixed in there like it needs to. Now, if I were to hold it vertically straight up like this, I'm going to end up with the same problem I would with that little piece where, you know, because you have like these little low sections, I'm never going to get my hardener in there, and I'm going to be fighting going like that right there. So I just hold it like this, and I just stir aggressively like this for about 30 to 45 seconds. You'll kind of know when it's thoroughly mixed because it will change a little bit of color. It'll get a little bit more opaque than when you first put it in there. And then pretty much once you got it ready to go, then you can start working with your fiberglass mat. So we'll talk about the mat next. So you have two different kinds of mats. You have a woven mat, and then you have a stranded mat. Now I'm going to show you a couple examples of those. Your woven is kind of like more of like a, almost reminds you of like a fabric. It kind of reminds you like a carbon fiber, like a window screen, maybe like a pair of jeans, as you see where it's all woven, you know, with each other and stuff like that. What this particular one is good for is a lot of flat surfaces and gentle curves, I guess you could say. So like, say like this can right here. It's great for here. It'd be great for going around this curve right here. You can even use it for this top up here. If you, you know, before you cover it in resin, take a pair of scissors, do a couple little relief cuts, you know, then you can fold it and to kind of create, you know, that thing around that corner and stuff like that. And that's what this is good for. That's why I use this for the main portion of the mannequin, because the mannequin is a lot of flat surfaces with gentle curves. Not to mention, once this is fully dry, it lays pretty flat and doesn't need a whole lot of sanding to make it nice and smooth and stuff like that. So that's why this is really good for that kind of application. The next one is what they call stranded. Now, it's just exactly what it sounds like. So when you look at it, it looks like a bunch of little stranded pieces. They're not woven to each other. They're just kind of semi-glued together with this little mat that they make right here. And this is good for curves, complex contours, and things like that, because as the resin mixes with this, these fibers can actually come apart. So you see we can actually pull this stuff apart like this, and it'll make a whole bunch of individual pieces that will actually conform to all these different contours and shapes and make this work really good. And to kind of show you what I'm referring to is I have a little piece of styrofoam right here that I just made a couple bunch of little things in, almost like, say like we're making like a busted up block. So you see you got a nice little sharp curves and stuff like that. This will work, but it can get kind of frustrating because it won't follow everything really good. And with these things being much thicker, they're going to want to stick up. They're going to make little poking things. It's going to stab you. This right here, as the fiberglass resin gets on there, it starts to break apart. This will conform to all these little nooks and crannies really good and lay down really nice for you. Now, if you're doing anything over top of styrofoam, just like with anything else with styrofoam, you got to protect it. Just because fiberglass resin gets hot as it cures, and it will melt your styrofoam. So what you're going to want to do is either put a couple layers of house paint over top of it first, masking tape, or what some people might do is I might use like a 3M adhesive tack spray, spray that on there, and then use like a tin foil and just take a tin foil and put tin foil and stick it to the tack spray and all that. And then once they got that, then they could put their fiberglass mat over top of that after the fact and stuff like that. And that's how they would do that. Excuse me. Let me get that tinfoil out of the way so it doesn't make a whole lot of noise. And this is where your brushes are going to come in. So now you've already mixed your resin, the whole 9 yards. Now you need your brushes. Now all the brushes are going to be for is for spreading your resin and pushing this into your contour. So like, say like right here, you lay this on top here. You see where it's going to kind of sit up. Then you're going to use the brush and you're going to push it down into all your resin to create your shape. And that's what's going to essentially create your form when you're said and done. And then you're going to brush it and stuff like that. And then once you're done, you're going to throw this away because you're never going to get this cleaned out. So it's a one-time use deal. You do what you need to do, you throw it away. Kind of sucks, but that's the nature of doing fiberglass. Okay, so before we start messing with any kind of fiberglass, let's have a quick disclaimer of the dangers and what you need to do to protect yourself. Whenever you're doing anything with any kind of fiberglass, you always want to be in a well-ventilated area, preferably in an outdoor space. If you have, say, a covered spot where you can put a drop cloth down, it's always going to be ideal. If you're inside of a shop, make sure your shop is open, fans going, well-ventilated. While you're actually applying the fiberglass, where you're mixing your resins and putting the mesh and stuff like that down, a respirator isn't necessarily required at that point in time, especially if you're in a well-ventilated area. But if you have a respirator, you can never be too safe to just go ahead and wear it anyways. When you get to the point where you're starting to do some sanding and stuff like that, doesn't matter the circumstances, indoor, outdoors, fan blowing, well-ventilated, Always wear a respirator. That stuff is extremely nasty and very harmful to you. If you're working in a garage space, kind of like you see here with my garage, after I usually finish sanding, I will leave my workspace for anywhere from 10 to 15 minutes and let that dust settle. Because if I were to go ahead and pull the respirator off and I still have all that clouded dust around me, I'm not doing myself any favors because I'm keeping myself in that environment. So I'll usually leave my shop for anywhere from 10 to 15 minutes, let the dust settle, come back out, and then I resume my work at that point. So with some of the disclaimers out of the way, some of the dangers, what you really need to do to protect yourself, let's go ahead and start working on some fiberglass. Okay, so I'm going to just do a couple little small demonstrations on like a complex kind of shape, just a flat, basic, very simple kind of shape. I was originally thinking about doing one of those body forms, but I kind of feel that's a little more of like an advanced kind of thing. And if this is your first time doing fiberglass, you're not going to tackle something like that. You're going to do small stuff first. So I want to do a couple small demonstrations. I think it'd be better for me to show you that than trying to do something extreme. So I'm going to start off by making my mixing container, which, like I said, I like to use just Coke bottles and stuff like that. I'll usually cut it shortly below the label right here, so it gives me plenty of material to work with. And then if you can see right here, this defined line right there, where the mold switches from the lower half to the upper half. Generally, that's really close to where I usually will fill my resin up to, and then I'll usually add anywhere from 7 to 10 drops of that hardener in there, and then it allows me to mix it up really good. So let me go ahead and get this cut real fast. Now, depending on the size of the project is going to determine how much I'm going to put inside here. But for my normal size project, I like to go to that line because that gives me plenty of time to work with it before it hardens on me, and I don't have a whole lot of waste. Obviously, if the project is much smaller, I might only go half the distance in that cup right there. Okay, so I got some gloves on. Like I said, I generally will kind of fill this to close to that line, which I'm not going to go that much because I'm not doing that much, fiberglass stuff. So I'm going to go to about there. And then on my hardener, I'll just do just a few little drops like that right there. And then I will take my stirring stick. And this is where I'll do my stirring. And you see where I kind of hold the cup at an angle? Now you got to be careful because you'll sling that stuff everywhere if you get a little too aggressive with it. But I'll just spin that around, really agitate that stuff up really good, make sure you get a really good, mix of your part A and part B, essentially. And like I said, you'll kind of notice it change a little color. It'll turn a little more opaque than kind of semi-clear when it first came out of the can. I usually go about 30, maybe 45 seconds at the most. Now, once you put that hardener in there, the clock is ticking. And depending on the ambient temperature and how much hardener in there, you have anywhere from about 10 to 12 minutes to do what you need to do. All right, so I got that right there. Now, there's a couple different ways you can do your stuff. You can start off by taking your material, lay it down on your, like a workbench, slather it up first, like this. Get it covered in your resin, and then transfer it over to your piece, like this right here. And then just kind of smooth it out, going around your corners. Like that right there. And then just, let that dry. If you still see some air pockets, you just kind of go up and down like this with your brush to kind of get rid of those air pockets. Now, going sharp corners like this, it's going to be really hard to get rid of those air pockets. That's just going to be something you're going to have to live with, essentially. Or you can do another method where you can, I'll just do it this way, where you could take your resin and put it on your material first, like this, brush it on, coat your product really good, and then you can stick your stuff on after the fact. And as you push it in, you'll notice it starts to get transparent, and that lets you know that it's getting covered with the fiberglass resin. And you go like that, and then you can always go back over and add a little more to it and kind of spread that back and forth. Make sure that every ounce of that mesh is covered, and you'll notice areas that are not covered because you'll see where it's still bright white right there. You go right over top of it, now you see it's disappeared. So you just spread it around, and then once you got good coverage, you're happy where it's at, then you just got to let that sit there and dry. Now, depending on how much hardener you put in, and depending on the ambient temperature outside, it could take about 20, maybe 25 minutes till this is ready to do some more work to. So you would just set it off to the side and play the waiting game. Now, for say something like this, I would recommend something like this to coat your material first. So coat your material really good, really get it lathered up like this. And you notice how I put the foil over top of that styrofoam just to protect that styrofoam. Okay. And then once you got that, then you could just take this, put it on top of your styrofoam. Now I'm going to put the styrofoam directly on top of that so we can see what it does to the bottom of it. And then this right here, you just work it into all those little confined areas. If you have areas that bunch up like that, you can just kind of stretch it like this, just kind of. And what you're doing is you're pulling those fibers apart from each other. And if you need to, put your finger in there so you can hold it and just stretch it out, work it. Like that. And if it feels like it's not enough resin on there, you can always pour more on there. I might have just got a little carried away with that. But the more you put on there, the more you can stretch and move the material without dragging it. The last thing you want to do is you don't want to pull it away from what you're working on. You want it to stay on your material. So if it gets to where it's almost like too dry, what you're going to do is you're going to end up dragging it, and you're not really going to, you're going to pull it out of the spaces. But when it dries, that's when you're going to notice that you kind of pulled it out. And at that point, once it's dry, it's really hard to work with. At that point, you almost have to cut that area out and then start all over again. So you see where that right there has now got itself into all those little nooks and crannies, all those little grooves. Just like that. And then we just wait and let that dry. And once it's dry, it'll turn. It'll get it to where it'll be a little more of a solid kind of color to it, where you're not really going to see that foil as bright as that. It'll definitely be more of a yellowish, kind of color. If you feel that you don't have enough on there, you can also put it on your brush and just walk it on there. Like that. But pretty much that's all there is to putting your fiberglass mat and stranded stuff on. Now, like say this right here, say this was already cured, and I want to put a second layer on top there, and I have another piece right here. Like say I want to go over that seam right there and dress that seam up. Then I would just mix up a little more, put some on there, spread it around, add my other piece. Walk the resin around till the material starts to be transparent. That's what's going to let me know that I have full coverage on it. And then again, you just let that dry. Now, depending on how thick it is, if say after it dries, you kind of run your fingers over it and you feel a lot of sharp edges, take some sandpaper and knock those edges off before adding any extra layers. So this way you don't slowly build out those big sections and make it harder and harder to sand later on. But let's go ahead and let these dry, and we'll show you what it looks like when they're all set up and ready for maybe another layer. In the meantime, unfortunately, this right here is not salvageable. You can't pour it back in your can because you have hardener in there. If you pour it back in your can, you're going to destroy the whole can. So pretty much what I have right here is wasted. So I just will usually pour it into like a box of some kind. So this way it can harden inside the box and not get stuck to everything. So let me go ahead and get rid of that, and we'll wait for this to dry. All right, so with these pieces being dried to the touch, I can go ahead and show you guys the differences of how the stranded will sit down inside all these little complex areas and stuff like that versus the woven sitting on like good flat surfaces or general curves and stuff like that. So let's talk about the styrofoam one first. So you see overall this actually turned out pretty nice. It's actually a pretty good looking piece. And you saw where when I was kind of holding the piece in here, because I wanted to make sure I didn't pull my strands out of there. And as I was working it, I was essentially pulling those fibers apart, and I was stretching everything to get everything to lay nice and flat and stay in, in their respective places that I wanted them to stay. Let me get a little closer and kind of show you. You can see where these things just conformed really nice, especially like right here. Like when you look at this section right here, you see where the foam came up, it curved down, it curved back up, it curved forward, had another little dip right here. And you see how well it conformed to all those areas really nicely. It really took that shape and gives you a really nice looking piece right there. Same with the side right here. You give this another couple hours of cure time. You could probably do a small light sanding on there, throw some paint on there, and you're good to go. This essentially is going to be a finished, ready to go piece. Not to mention, you see how much stronger that piece is. You're not going to break that piece now. I mean, you take a hammer or something like that, you're going to break it. But I mean, if say this is in your display and somebody walks by and say they hit it, step on it, they're not going to hurt that piece. That piece is nice and solid. Now, what I want to show you about the styrofoam and resin, how it will melt it. See right here, I have the masking tape and how I stopped it right here. You see what it did to that styrofoam. Once the resin touched the styrofoam, it just melts it really bad. And on the bottom here, where I actually let it sit in the resin, you see where it just ate that styrofoam up pretty bad. So as long as you protect your styrofoam with, like I said, just a couple coats of latex house paint, some tin foil, masking tape, it really doesn't matter. As long as that resin doesn't touch that styrofoam directly, it will hold up and retain that shape for you and stuff like that. So it'll give you a nice, good piece right there. Now, when you get to the woven, like I said, woven a lot of times will lay much flatter than that stuff does, depending on what you're doing. It doesn't require a whole lot of sanding and covers a lot better. So you see like that piece right there, overall, that's actually a nice looking piece. Now, no resin will ever dry as flat as a piece of glass. It's always going to be a little on the bumpy side. So depending on what you're doing, if you need it to be smooth, all you got to do is sand it. You can sand this stuff down really nice. If it doesn't matter for it being a little bumpy, light sanding so your paint can stick to it and you're ready to go. The only area on this one that I would say would need definitely some sanding is like right here where I had the secondary piece I put over top of it, and you see the little edge right here. You just sand that down so it's level with the rest of it and you're ready to go. So woven is really good for a lot of big flat surfaces, regular curves, lays good, gives you a nice, good finished looking piece right from the get-go. The stranded, you just got to conform it, work with it, but once it dries, it'll give you a really nice looking piece. Outside that's all there is to do in fiberglass work. It's really not a very complex kind of thing. So really the next thing is to get some material and make something. I would suggest getting the smaller jug of fiberglass resin first. Those little packs of mat that you saw, those average about $8 a piece. Maybe just grab one of each and just find something to make. Even if you're just making something silly, because you got to get some practice. You got to get the feel for it. Like I said, the most important thing is making sure that when you mix your resin, you mix that stuff thoroughly. So I like to use the Coke bottle because I like to use that little line at the bottom as a good reference. So when I fill up that line, I'm going to add about 10 drops of that hardener to it, and I'm going to stir it really, really good. Long as you start off really good with your fiberglass resin, you're going to end up with a really nice piece. So at this point, hopefully you guys enjoyed this video. I know it was long, boring, a lot of talking. You might even fell asleep a couple times during it. I do apologize for that, but I hope this gave you the confidence that you can go buy this material now and tackle a small project and work your way up into a much larger, bigger project. So hopefully this was a very helpful video for you guys. We'll see you guys on the next one, and thanks for watching.